Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Carrie Ramsey. For those of you that I haven't met before, I am the project manager for the Weekend Project, which is led by Queen's University and is funded by FedDev Ontario through the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy Ecosystem Fund. So welcome back. If you've been a part of many of our weekend workshops in the past, it's so great to have you back. I see some familiar faces on the call, but if you're brand new, we also welcome you. This is a great topic we're going to dive into in just a moment. Stacey Love-Jolicoeur, of course, is our guest and presenter. So it's wonderful to have her with us today. Stacey's a weekend client, and so she is doing some very exciting things that I think that you're going to be interested in today. So we'll dive in. In fact, she is also an Indigenous woman, so she's going to do the land acknowledgement for us in just a moment. While we're getting set up here, please do take a moment to let us know in the Zoom chat where you're connecting from. And we would love to find a little bit more. If you have an organization or business you're representing today, let's use that as a networking piece as well. So without further ado, I guess I should let you know today's session is being recorded. So I'll make sure to put a note into the Zoom chat as to where you can find that as well. All right. There are going to be some video clips, which just reminds me as well that we have enabled the auto transcription as well on the bottom of your screen. And if that for some reason is a little bit distracting to you, you can actually click on your live transcript button and you can hide that if you would like to. But if it's helpful, we hope that it will help you get more out of today's presentation. On that note, Stacey's going to show a few videos today as well. And so I will be dropping a context description into the Zoom chat so that you can make sure to grab the full understanding of that if for some reason you're having trouble hearing it. Or maybe have accessibility issues there as well. All right, so thank you so much for joining us. Stacey, go ahead. The show is yours.
Thank you very much, Carrie. Thank you, everybody, for attending today. It's wonderful to be here. We're going to begin by acknowledging our lands. Just one moment, please. There we go. So we will begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on Aboriginal lands, and it has been inhabited by our Indigenous peoples since the beginning of time. As settlers, we're grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank all the generations of people who have taken care of our lands for thousands of years. Long before today, as we gather here, there have been Aboriginal peoples that have been stewards of our land. We acknowledge the ancestral territories of the Anishinaabe, the Mohawks, the Ojibwe, the Cree, the Algonquins, and all the others that I have not mentioned, and to whose territory we congregate today. These territories are covered under the Upper Canada Treaties, and we recognize and deeply appreciate the historic connection to this place. We also recognize the contributions of the Métis, the Inuits, and other Indigenous peoples that have made both in shaping and strengthening our community, in particular our province and our country as a whole. As settlers, this recognition is a contribution of historic importance of the Indigenous people in our society today. This acknowledgement recognizes the Indigenous heritage and the importance of the lands that we are located on. In addition to helping build awareness of our First Nations communities, this acknowledgement also honors the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action to honor the Indigenous people and historic and contemporary contributions in Canada. On this day, our meeting place is still occupied by many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We are grateful to have this opportunity to work on this land, and by doing so, we give respect to all its first inhabitants. Hello, everybody. My name is Stacey Love-Jolicoeur, and I am an educator and support worker in the LGBT community. In this role, I provide services in 13 federal institutions and 7 halfway houses throughout Canada, from the East Coast to the West Coast, and from the West Coast to the East Coast, and all points in between. Most recently, I created and founded a not-for-profit agency called SAGA, LGBT Education and Support Services of Canada. Second to the work I do in the correctional services, this new agency provides presentations on diversity, inclusion, and affirmation, LGBT cultural competency, and transgender 101. As educator and support workers for the LGBT LGBT community. We do group facilitations, peer support, post-operative recovery assistance, and we're in the process of creating a poverty and homelessness program called Building Self-Sufficiency, where we offer transitional services for anyone considering or wishing to transition. I also volunteer as the coordinator and facilitator for a Transform group in Belleville for the last 9 years. I'm an active member on the organizing committee of the Bay of Quinte Pride, to which I am the chair. I am a two-spirit Métis woman with a strong passion for the betterment of the LGBT community. In addition to this, I deliver workshops and lectures to companies, organizations, and service agencies in support of the LGBT community. My passion and insight into the LGBTQ2S community and issues is a welcome resource to the many groups that I work with. So a little bit about our day today. We're going to review some LGBTQ2S history, look at some gender and sexuality, some terminology, understanding gender binary, and examining our consciousness and internalized biases about LGBT culture, and also to the best practices to support LGBTQ people, and why mental health about LGBTQ is important. And then we'll conclude that and have a short question and answer period. So if you would like questions or answers, please save them till the end. We're going to start with our first film. And this first film, oh, I see it's a little bit askew. I'm sorry for that. It won't make a difference. The first film is Pride and Justice, making 50 years since Stonewall riots. This film marks the 50th anniversary of Stonewall, a major milestone that sparked a modern movement for the LGBTQ rights. NBC's Stephanie Guck talks to those who were at Stonewall in as part of that.
It's a global flashpoint for equal rights, born in a New York City bar.
Take me back to 1969. What was this place like?
It was a dump. It was a burnt out bar that the mafia came in and painted everything black, opened up the doors, and made money.
The Stonewall Inn, like almost all underground bars that catered to gay clientele at the time, was run by organized crime. But the LGBTQ community in the late 60s had few other options.
How important was this place to you and your friends back then?
Well, it was important because we could dance with each other. Remember, it was against the law to serve known homosexuals alcohol in New York City.
The last week of June 1969, an increasingly impatient NYPD raided the Stonewall multiple times. And on Friday, June 28th, its oppressed clientele, many transgender, minority, or poor, had enough.
Did it feel like every other raid that you had experienced up until that point?
No, because the neighborhood cops always raided the bar, and they would walk in and say, "All right, girls, line up." And we'd line up as usual, but they came in nasty, hollering and pushing and shoving, and they hit somebody, and somebody hit back, and that started the whole thing.
At times, the Stonewall riots were actually lighthearted, but the underlying anger also sparked outbursts of violence. The officer who led the raid spoke to Today in 1994.
You must understand that these were kids who were out for a good time, and we spoiled it.
And then what happened when you came out here that night?
Well, after that, they broke the windows. We threw garbage cans through the window. We fought back. We shaked police cars. We broke paddy wagon locks.
Police presence and LGBTQ resistance persisted for several nights, with dozens of arrests and injuries. The NYPD shut down the Stonewall Inn for good, but a movement was born, and the struggle for mere survival or acceptance pivoted into gay pride, held on the anniversary of the uprising. The building itself changed hands and businesses for decades, before its current owners stepped in with an eye on preserving history.
It wasn't being treated with the respect it should have been. This is where Pride began, so we had to bring it back to that status. We didn't want to make it a museum, but we also wanted everyone to know the history.
That history is still being made. Stonewall has transformed into a mecca and a sanctuary. For mourning, like after the Pulse massacre, and for celebration, like after the Supreme Court legalized gay marriage.
Yeah, to some degree, this has become for the LGBTQ community a kind of emotional ground zero, isn't it?
Absolutely. It really has become that symbol of gay rights around the world. We get visitors from everywhere you can think of. And I think when you talk about Stonewall, it resonates now because people are understanding exactly what happened here.
Tree, who was a customer at the Stonewall when the uprising happened, is now a bartender here and a living piece of its history.
I was very proud that I'm here. It's my second family, my home, and here.
In 2016, President Obama named the area outside the Stonewall a national park, the first to recognize the LGBTQ community. Pride is now a worldwide celebration, a community of millions of individuals, but its spiritual birthplace is this corner in New York's West Village.
This is a place where people can come to mourn. It's a place where people can come and rejoice. It's a safe haven for everybody. The straight allies also.
It's a piece of history. It's part of an education.
We don't take it lightly. We understand that we're the innkeepers of history, and that's a big responsibility.
The first Toronto Pride, 1972, about 200 people walked in the streets. The second film we're about to see is called Hugh and Grant, and they remember what it was like to be in that first Pride, as do I, as I was there. In 1972, how being gay was thought to be a disease. And talking with a police officer about the Pride Parade here, you'll see in this film.
We were yelling things like, "We're here, we're queer, get used to it."
When do we want it?
Now! Well, in 1972, when I marched with a bullhorn at the front of the Gay Pride Parade, I was 6 foot, I had long hair.
Both long-haired and radical.
That's right, those radicals. And there weren't very many people on the street because we were it. It wasn't like Gay Pride now where there's as many people watching as marching. It was just us.
It was fun because you had taken control of your life, which other people said you shouldn't have control of because you were sick or diseased. But we were saying, no, we're not. In fact, we're going to change the way society views us. And starting here, right now, starting here and now.
I did go to 52 Division, and the cop was a really nice guy. I mean, he was a very sweet guy, and he was deeply embarrassed at talking to us because he'd never heard of gay before. But finally, he looked me in the eye, and he said, "I just have to ask you, do you really believe in this cause?" And I said, "Well, yeah, that's why we're having the parade." And he said, "And you're really gonna march down the street saying that you're, you know?" And I said, "Well, yeah, that's what we're gonna do."
I've seen lots of funny things in my time.
In
We were yelling
comparison to today, 2019, our last Toronto Pride because of COVID, 3.3 million people, including our Prime Minister. What a huge celebration in comparison to 1972 with a few hundred people, where we marched in protest, in comparison to today where we celebrate. So before we get going, I'd like to set the stage. Confidentiality is required to establish and ensure a safe learning environment for all people. And please remember that the only thing that we have the right to share is our own story and the learning. What you are seeing here is a series of clips from various events that I have been involved with. I was fortunate enough to be awarded the Women's Leadership Award in 2018 by our member, by the House of Commons. A huge acclamation, and I am so proud to have been part of that. Time for a little bit of inclusive education so that when you do encounter somebody from the LGBT community, you are prepared. We're going to begin with the flag, the Pride flag. It's not just a pretty flag, but when we see the flag, it indicates a safe place for people from the LGBT community to be accepted for who we are. The interesting thing is that the pride flag is not just a pretty flag. In fact, every color of the rainbow has a tremendous amount of meaning. Red for life, orange for healing, yellow for sunlight, green for nature, blue for serenity, and the purple or the magenta is for our spirit. So when I see the flag, I see diversity because it talks about everything that we are, our body, our mind, our spirit. The progressive flag was created in 2018 to also feature the black and brown stripe, which represents people of color. The baby blue and pink include the trans population. The trans flag is a wonderful flag. Typically, it's blue for boys, pink for girls, and the white is for everybody else, or what we consider gender non-conforming, gender variant, gender fluid, or even gender queer. The flag's not only a symbol of our pride, but it's also a symbol of hope. And huge progress has been made in our struggle for equal rights. Our Ontario government has made immense advances in access to care and human rights for the LGBT people to be recognized as equal members of society. And Bill C-16, the anti-discrimination bill, confirms that. And now today, general practitioners and doctors can now prescribe hormone replacement therapies and recommend surgery processes. It should be noted that even today, many anti-gay opponents are increasingly becoming more frustrated because their hate biases can no longer defeat the love in the community. And it should be noted that things aren't perfect, but as we progress, the movements we are making are extraordinary, and the rainbow affirms our hope for even a better future. Time for a little bit of trans awareness. Dysphoria, coming out and accommodating. So what is gender? Gender is what's between our ears, and sex is what's between your legs. Biological sex is based on all our physical attributes, such as sex chromosomes and hormones, and internal reproductions, and our external genitalia. Whereas gender is the concept of identity based on our roles, our behaviors, our activities, and how we present ourselves. Transgender or trans is an umbrella term used to identify people's gender, expressions, or behaviors, which is typically different than what we were assigned at birth. When a child is born, the doctor looks at the genitalia and says, "Congratulations, mom, dad, you have a baby boy or a baby girl," only based on the external genitalia. It has nothing to do with those internal organs or how that child may grow up and see themselves in society. Being trans or transsexual or gender nonconforming is a matter of diversity. It's not pathology. We also need to acknowledge our two-spirit people, which I am, and I am not afraid of my truth anymore, and I will not omit pieces of me to make you comfortable. In the early 1600s, with the infiltration of white men on our lands, we were silenced for a very long time. And it's only in the last 50 to 75 years that Two-Spirit has been able to come back out into society. And in doing so, our elders in our community have recognized us to be mentors and healers and educators. And we've been awarded the most amazing gift to be the sacred medicine carriers as well. So let's understand a little bit about gender binary. We know that the word binary is a straight line. And on one end, we have the male. And typically males use he, him, and his for the pronouns. And then on the other end of the binary, we have female. And most females use she, her, and hers. But we've come to realize that we have everything in between. And that's where we get the LGBTQ2S, APPP, and it keeps going on and on and on. And lots of people will say, please explain that. So lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, and the Q is for our queer community. Remember that white line on the trans flag? Well, that white line is our queer community or our questioning community. And most of those people use the pronouns of they, them, and theirs. Now that's really difficult for people to understand because they're plurals. How can one person be more than one? Well, it's pretty easy actually. Some days they see themselves as masculine. Other days, they see themselves as female. But most days, they see themselves as themselves and just themselves, without sex, without gender identity, just being themselves. I hope that helps you understand that about the different things. 2S is for our two-spirit community. And then the APP can be anything that anybody wants. A for asexual, P for pansexual, the other P for polyamorous, and the list could go on and on and on. I was doing a presentation to a group of kids, 12 to 15 years of age. And this little 12-year-old trans girl put her hand up and she said, Stacey, what does that LGBTQ2S all mean? And what if we forget somebody? I said, you know, that's a really good question. So I started lesbian, gay, bisexual. She stopped me dead in my tracks. She said, I know all that, but what does it mean? And what if we forget somebody? I said, okay, Justine, that's a really good question. What are we supposed to use? And she said, well, in my circle of friends, we use the word SAGA, S-A-G-A. I said, okay, what does SAGA mean? And she said, sexuality and gender acceptance, and nobody is forgotten. You know, it really made me realize that we really need to pay attention to the power of our youth and how much we can learn from them. Understanding language is very, very difficult, and we need to remember that vocabulary and definitions are continuously evolving, and try to ensure that the language you use is kept respectful and inclusive. Definitions and terminology provided throughout my presentation are not meant to label, but rather to assist you to understand some of the terminology that you may come across when dealing with individuals from the community. Allow for them to tell you the words that they like to be used and for their circumstance. This will help foster respect and understanding. Terminology is fast and ever evolving, as I said. And these 4 words here, cisgender, intersex, gender dysphoria, and transition, are just some of it. In the literature that I've provided, I have provided a list of terminology and definitions that you are welcome to use as a resource. That is a small compilation taking from about 16 pages of terminology and definitions. But I've chosen these 3 pages for you to be more aligned with the LGBT culture. And we can see that, you know, there are many, 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 many words and phrases that are used within the community. And, you know, it's impossible for us to remember them all. It's impossible for myself to remember them all because they are ever changing. So I invite you to take the opportunity to become involved with that and understand those terminologies. So when you do talk to somebody from our community, you have those resources. Now, this film is about LGBT community and terminology. And one of the first things we do when attempting to be a better ally is try to understand it. And this makes a more inviting and inclusive community for you.
The first things to do when attempting to be a better LGBTQ+ ally or working toward creating a more inviting and inclusive space is to educate oneself. It can be daunting to know how to do or how to behave when there's so much we don't know about a community. Thankfully, the internet has a plethora of information to help get you started. One of the best places to start when first learning about the LGBTQ+ community is to start with basic terminology. Note that definitions are always growing and changing with the community as cultural norms change. Also, not every member of the LGBTQ+ community personally identifies with the terms, so always trust the person you are interacting with to self-identify and go with the definition they are comfortable with if they choose to explain or describe their identity to you. Lesbian. women who are primarily attracted romantically, erotically, and/or emotionally to other women. Gay, experiencing attraction solely or primarily to some members of the same gender. It can be used to refer to men who are attracted to other men and women who are attracted to women. An umbrella term used to refer to the queer community as a whole or as an individual identity label for anyone who is not straight. Bisexual, a person who experiences attraction to some men and women. A person who experiences attraction to some people of their gender and another gender. Bisexual attraction does not have to be equally split or indicate a level of interest that is the same across the genders an individual may be attracted to. It can be shortened to bi and is often used interchangeably with pansexual. Asexual, experiencing little or no sexual attraction to others and/or a lack of interest in sexual relationships or behavior. Asexuality exists on a continuum, from people who experience no sexual attraction or have any desire for sex, to those who experience low levels or sexual attraction only under specific conditions. Many of these different places on the continuum have their own identity labels, such as demisexual, sometimes abbreviated to ACE. Transgender, a gender description for someone who is transitioned or is transitioning from living as one gender to another. An umbrella term for anyone whose sex assigned at birth and gender identity does not correspond in the expected way. For example, someone who was assigned male at birth but does not identify as a man. When it comes to gender, there are a few more definitions that might be helpful. Cisgender, a gender description for when someone's sex assigned at birth and gender identity correspond in the expected way. For example, someone who was assigned male at birth and identifies as a man. A simple way to think about it is if a person is not transgender, they are cisgender. The word cisgender can also be shortened to cis. Agender, a person with no or very little connection to the traditional system of gender, no personal alignment with the concepts of either man or woman, and/or someone who sees themselves as existing without gender. Sometimes called gender neutral, or genderless. Gender fluid, a gender identity best described as a dynamic mix of boy and girl. A person who is gender fluid may always feel like a mix of the two traditional genders, but may feel more man some days and more woman other days. And gender identity, the internal perception of one's gender and how they label themselves, based on how much they align or don't align with what they understand their options for gender to be. Often conflated or confused with biological sex or sex assigned at birth.
Oh, sorry. All right. What you're seeing here is the DSM-5 302.85, and that, that is the clinical diagnosis that is required for us to have. Oh boy, sorry about this. I'm having some issues here. Just bear with me. Sorry, there it is. So this is the clinical diagnosis required in order for a person to transition medically. And what I mean by that is to have hormones prescribed to them and to be allotted opportunities for surgeries. It is absolutely required that a doctor diagnose with gender dysphoria. And what is dysphoria? Well, simply put, it's looking in the mirror and not liking what we see. That's pretty much it. Now, our next film here is called Love Has No Labels, and it's about diversity and inclusion. Now, while most people consider themselves to be unprejudiced, many of us intentionally make snap decisions about the people we see. And this film will allow you opportunity to look at that as race, age, gender, religion, sexual orientation, or even people with disabilities. And the campaign, or the Love Has No Labels, challenges us to open our eyes and our biases and the prejudices, to stop it in ourselves and in our friends and in our families and in our colleagues. And this film will allow you that opportunity to rethink your own biases.
And I can't change, even if I tried, even if I wanted to. And I can't change, even if I tried, even if I wanted to. My love, my love, my love, she keeps me warm. She keeps me warm. She keeps me warm. She keeps me warm. And I can't change, even if I tried, even if I wanted to. My love, my love, my love, she keeps me warm. She keeps me warm. She keeps me warm. She keeps me warm. And I can't change, even if I tried, even if I wanted to. My love, my love, my love, she keeps me warm. 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 She keeps me warm.
My heart doesn't see race. Love has no age limit.
We are neighbors and best friends.
We all have different religions, but we have universal love as well.
I love my sister.
Love is love.
Our family is no less than any other family.
A fabulous film. Thank you very much to the Ad Council for that. So what was the purpose of this video? Now, typically pre-COVID, I used to do these presentations in person, and quite often we would be able to interact with the audience. It's more difficult on Zoom. So I'm just gonna go through this anyways. So what was the purpose of this video? And it is that love has no labels. Did this video in any way show us anything about cultural diversity? Absolutely it did, in many ways. It spoke about gender and those with disabilities and our various religions. It was also authentically diverse, and it also spoke about ageism. So what was the theme of that video? Could we tell what those people were when they were behind the screen? No, all we saw was a skeleton. And, you know, even our medical community, unless you're absolutely trained to identify it, have difficulty looking at a skeleton and recognizing male or female. So the answer is that we are all the same inside. And, we need to remember that. And that really helps us, examine our own internal biases when we have prejudices against others, that we are the same as them. Our one planet, our Mother Earth. And on her, we have 7 continents with 195 countries and 7.1 billion people. That is a lot of people. And in order to have that kind of population in a world, we need diversity. What is diversity? Diversity is about being different. It's about being our individual selves and valuing each other, regardless of what our skin is, or our ideologies, or what talents we possess, or even how old we are. That's what diversity is. It's about being equal opportunity for everybody. So why should this matter for you? Because many from our community are denied jobs or promotions or accommodations because of your sexual orientation or our gender identity. And I'll speak to this personally. I have 6 college diplomas and 2 university degrees, and I couldn't get a job. I don't know how many times I heard from HR professionals, "You're not a good fit." Why am I not a good fit? Because you don't like my male pattern baldness, or you don't like my deep masculine voice, or you don't like my 5 o'clock shadow? What is it? They would never answer me for fear of prosecution, right? Because even today, many LGBT people are beaten and murdered for being who we are. And we read about this and hear about it on social media on a daily basis, and it breaks my heart. Because of biases, we're made to feel uncomfortable when showing affection to a partner, especially if it's in a same-sex relationship. Why is it okay for a man and a woman to pull up to the train station, give each other a kiss goodbye, but it's not okay for 2 guys to pull up to the train station and kiss each other goodbye? Because LGBT materials in many, many schools are censored and are banned, in fact, from many school boards. That dynamics and that mentality is changing. In 2019, I was part of a group for the Peterborough School Board, where we created 5 learning programs to make LGBT cultural competency throughout the school system, and provide opportunity for people to have those resources. Because our relationships remain unrecognized in hundreds of federal, state, and provincial and territorial laws, and in many states and countries, it's prohibited, and they will actually kill you for being LGBT. It's a sad situation, but it's true, and it's very real. The most important reason why it should matter is because our LGBT community is disproportionately at risk of suicide. In fact, 77% of LGBT people will consider suicide, and 45% will actually attempt it. If we back up for a moment and look at those numbers, when I showed you our globe, our Mother Earth, was 7.1 billion people. In 2012, Transpulse News did a study that identified 10% of our population as LGBT. Personally, I think it's more around 20 or 25%, but we'll go with the 10% for the sake of argument. 7.1 billion people at 10% of the population leaves 710 million people at risk of suicide. If we break that down into the numbers listed on the screen at 77%, we're looking at about 550 million people that will consider suicide, and at least half, 25 or 45%, will attempt that. So we're looking at, huge numbers of 250 million people that will attempt suicide. This is really, really not okay. And for the most part, it's because of rejection. It's because of unacceptance, whether it be by family, friends, loved ones, or our work environment, which can become toxic. How can we best assist somebody in their LGBT journey? Well, the most important thing to remember is to don't make an assumption. We don't know what someone's sexual orientation or the gender identity is based on how they look, right? It's important not to assume that everybody's straight or heterosexual. Treat all people with respect, and that we have many roles and identities. Employ your effective communication skills. And remember that personal information is private and confidential and should be protected. Always use neutral or inclusive language with people. For example, partner or guardian instead of husband or wife. And listen to and reflect the person's choice of the language that they use when they describe their sexual orientation or their gender identity and or their relationship with their partner. Use the words that they use. Always be honest. If you have little experience dealing with somebody from the community or you're anxious about it, let them know that. Say it's okay that you're working to understand this information, but there are some areas that you're still learning about. This will help create a safe place, and it also opens for the dialogue. If you're unsure about somebody's gender identity, ask a neutral question. How would you like me to address you? That's a pretty simple thing. What pronouns would you prefer that I use when I am addressing you? I had a situation yesterday. I had to go to the hospital for a procedure. And throughout the day, I was misgendered 15 times in that hospital because of my voice, because of my male pattern baldness. It wasn't because of my 5 o'clock shadow, because I had a mask on. Even though it says female on my identification, even though it said female on my identification wristband, I was continuously called him and her, him and sir. So it's really, really hard. We try to create a welcoming environment, and I invite you to do so. And how can you do that? By posting inclusive posters or pamphlets or symbols that reflect inclusivity. Post symbols such as the pride flag or pride stickers. And if you don't have one and you would like them, please reach out to me as the coordinator of the Transform group. Our group sells flags as a fundraiser, and we have all the different kinds of flags that you could want right here in Ontario. Please reach out to me, and they're very reasonably priced. Attend events. Have you ever been to a pride parade? Make it a point to go, and I can assure you that it'll be the most exciting time of your life. Recognize the differences between tolerance and acceptance and celebration and advocacy. Reflect on your own practice. Do you advocate for the LGBT community? Do you challenge homophobic and heterosexual comments? How many times has anybody been to a party or a social gathering and they always hear, hey, did you hear the joke about? Well, what's that joke about? That joke is about sex, religion, authenticity, or many other things that we've already talked about in terms of diversity. It's always an attack on those people. Reflect on your limits of understanding and seek training. And thank you for being here today. It shows that you're willing to do that. So advocate for that education. And if you would like me to come to your agency or company, please reach out. Understand the effects of heterosexualism in your workplace. Provide support to fellow workers or colleagues, and stand up against that workplace bullying and discrimination and hatred. Do you have coworkers that are out, or do they feel intimidated and afraid and hide themselves? Tell the person it's okay if you're LGBT identified. Thank you for sharing that. I can only imagine how difficult it was for you to tell me. As a person from the LGBT community, what are some of the things that you worry about the most? What kinds of supports or help do you think you need? Not what kinds of helps or support can I give you? It's not up to you, it's up to them. So please ask them. A little bit about mental health. And why is mental health important? Because nobody wants to be stuck in a closet. And for most of my life, I was suppressed. It was really, really difficult for me. Even though I identified at a very young age, 54 years ago, at the age of 9, I was oppressed by being put into conversion therapy in a mental hospital. I was oppressed by being arrested when I was 14 at that 1972 Toronto Pride Parade. Why did I get arrested? Because I wore a dress. A 14-year-old person with a dress on gets charged with disturbing the peace because they wore a dress. it was not a good time. So that's why we have to do this.
We all have mental health. It is just as important as physical health. It is not only about mental illness or mental disorders. This is just one part of a bigger picture. It's best to think about mental health as being on a continuum, rather than people being either mentally ill or mentally well. We are all on the continuum, and we move up and down according to factors such as our genetic makeup and upbringing, our life circumstances, and the stresses we are under. At one end of the continuum, we have mental disorders, like depression or anxiety. And at the other end, we have states of positive mental health, when we're thriving, content, and fulfilled. The aim of mental health interventions is to move people up the continuum, so that they're able to reach their full potential and live satisfying lives. The World Health Organization describes mental health as a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. Being mentally healthy means being resilient and able to cope with difficult times, feeling in control, being confident, feeling good about yourself, managing and expressing your emotions, building and maintaining good relationships. We all experience periods when we feel stressed, worried, anxious, sad, afraid, or angry. These are all normal emotions. However, when these emotions become severe enough that it interferes with a person's ability to function daily, and these feelings become persistent over time, then it can develop into a mental health problem. There are many different types of mental disorders. When left untreated, mental disorders can be chronic and long-lasting, and are associated with increased disability. They significantly have an impact on daily functioning and frequently interfere with family, social, and work responsibilities. Fortunately, there are effective treatments and evidence-based interventions available that aim to help individuals understand and cope with symptoms of mental illness. However, very few people with mental disorders access existing treatment services. This may be due to barriers such as the stigma attached to seeking help, the lack of understanding of mental health problems, uncertainty of how to get help, or the fear of disclosing mental health problems. Research shows that stigma remains one of the biggest factors preventing people from seeking help early for their mental health problems and getting the appropriate support they need. It is important to acknowledge that we all have mental health and have a personal responsibility to learn how we can improve and maintain our well-being in order to lead meaningful and satisfying lives.
A wonderful film. That speaks, directly to respect and dignity and fairness, both in many, many different ways and relationships, and to the safety and healthy working environment that we're in. Diversity is the source to innovation. And some of those expected behaviors is treating each other with respect and fairness, valuing diversity and the benefits of combining the uniqueness and qualities and strengths, helping to create and maintain safe and healthy environments that are free from harassment and discrimination, working together in the spirit of openness, honest, and transparency that encourages engagement, collaboration, and respectful communication. Mental health is important to everybody, in particular to the LGBT culture. And as I explained in terms of suicidality and the possible numbers that we could experience in terms of suicide. And remember that wellness is a journey, it's not a destination. Mental health, as we saw in that film, is all about stigma, and stigma affects everybody. It's a negative mental health link to negative physical health. Stigma impacts our wellness, and it affects self-image and self-esteem. In fact, 40% of stigma prevents 40% of the people with anxiety or depression to seek medical help. Antidepressants. We can see in the top picture on the left that this is an antidepressant. Walking in the woods, it's beautiful. We allow our stresses to go. The bottom one, the pill, is also an antidepressant. On the right, antidepressant again, the forest. And the bottom one is testosterone or estradiol or one of those T blockers, spirolactone, cyproterol, there's a number of them, that help us align ourselves with our body as we see it. They are all antidepressants. Issues that affect our community every day are huge. Stigma, homophobia, transphobia, hatred and bigotry, ostracization, suicidality, being Native or Two-Spirit, and the mental health issues. And what does that do? It gives lack of opportunity for employment, lack of trans competent care or medical care, lack of community. We are misgendered and how do you say, or I want to say, sought out to be wrong, or the stigma attached to that, misgendered, ignorance, and the lack of understanding, and then finally the lack of acceptance. And as I showed you in those comparison numbers, it's that lack of acceptance and that lack of love and that lack of understanding that causes people to have suicidality. That is the end of my presentation. I hope for you that it's really just the beginning. And if you are interested, to reach out to me. Remember that knowledge is having the right answer, but intelligence is asking the right question. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here today. It's been absolutely wonderful to speak with you. And I'm here up on the board right now is my contact information. I have also provided in the note section or chat section rather, my brochure and some contact information. And you are most welcome to reach out to me at any time. Thank you very much, everybody. And I will return to the room and go off of screen sharing now.
Actually, Stacey, you might just want to leave that there for a moment. Oh,
okay.
If anybody didn't get that contact information, you can reach out to me to get that. And we do have about 5 minutes left. If Stacey, first of all, thank you so much. It was absolutely, I was scribbling down notes. There's something I learn every time. I know that you have shared your personal story before with myself and parts of my team. And so I'm just so grateful for you sharing your insights and your deeply personal journey. If anyone has a question, we have the Zoom chat available. If there's any clarification you would like to use, I know some of you have to go, we're almost at the top of the hour, but if anybody has a question, please do put it into the chat. Stacey, there's been just a lot of really appreciation expressed in the chat for what you've shared. I'm so glad that the videos all came through. It was fantastic, really so wonderful. All right, so I'm just scanning the Zoom chat to see if there's any questions, but if not, by all means, if you missed Stacey's information, I'm putting my contact information one more time into the Zoom chat. And
I see Chantel Fraser has a question.
Go ahead, Chantel. Are you able to speak now? Oh, you take yourself off mute now. I think you can take yourself off. No?
Okay.
Try again.
There we go.
Type it. Okay. Stacey, could you say a few words about neo-pronouns like zir and them and things like that, just to help people understand?
Sure. So they're gender neutral pronouns, just like they, them, and theirs. Or on the male spectrum, it would be he and him. But other people choose to use other languages, whether it be ze, they, them, or them. There's a whole variety out there. And it's whatever somebody wants to use. And it's really difficult because these are kind of new words or new terminologies. But if you actually do some research, you're going to see that they're not new at all. They've been here for forever. It's just that, our old English language in terms of evolution and how language changes and the dynamics of that, we've lost some of those prehistoric terminologies like Z and Zem. So there is opportunity to learn about that as well. I hope that answered your question, Chantel. Thank you.
Stacey, Rachel has a question in the Zoom chat. She says, thanks so much for your informative session. Could you provide your definition of a two-spirited person? Or she says
Sure,
two-spirit?
absolutely. And thank you for that question. That's a great question. So the way it was explained to me as a very young child from my elders is that as a two-spirit person, we have the capacity to be a warrior, to be a provider on the male spectrum, but hence we are caring and nurturing and loving on the female spectrum, hence the two spirits together. I hope that can help you understand that.
I'd never heard it explained that way, so I appreciate that. And I did know that two-spirit was associated with Indigenous culture, but that explains what those two spirits are, which is very informative. Thank you so much for that. Rachel says thanks as well in the Zoom chat. All right, excellent. A final question. Any final question? I think we have time for one quick last question. And if not, oh, go ahead, Sunita, go ahead. Oh,
take
sorry.
yourself off mute.
No, I have to do it.
Oh.
Go try that again, Sunita. Yep.
Thank you, that worked. Stacey, again, very informative and very, it was thought-provoking, you know. Again, we all struggle with so many of these acronyms and pronouns and whatnot, so it was really well done. And I work in the space of EDI myself. I just wanted to know if I have your permission to reference your material.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, and you know, those films are not mine, there is so much resource out there and we can utilize so much, right? You know, I just feel privileged to be able to share what I've found to make this presentation successful. So yeah, absolutely. Please share it.
It all just flowed very well. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, all those pieces came together so well, Stacey. So on behalf of all of us, I want to say thank you for your time and for educating us today. And I believe that if nothing else, we'll leave here knowing not to make assumptions about others and open the conversation so that we can be more respectful and create a kinder community where everyone feels acknowledged, accepted, and that they belong. So thank you so much, Stacey.
You stole my closing line, Carrie, and that is be kind.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a beautiful day.
Bye, everybody.